Welcome to African Authors, Characters, and Themes in Speculative Fiction, Black Faces, Voices, and Actions in Science Fiction, Horror, and Fantasy. So we'd like to welcome you all, and we'd like to welcome our panelists with a hand. We're going to start off introducing our panelists. We'll start from you all's far left. All right, first we have Dada Ra, or do you just prefer to be called Dada Ra? Okay, Dada Ra. She's a renowned poet, photographer, and playwright who has been writing and performing professionally for 3 decades. She's the author of the play Lives, founding executive director of the Creators Gift 137 Incorporated, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and also the facilitator of Focus Peace Meditations, utilizing over 20 years of experience in gang violence prevention and conflict resolution as a specialist for the New York Board of Education. Let's give Dada Ra a hand, please. Next to her, we have Alicia, McCalla. She began her career at 10 years of age when her grandmother gave her an old reconditioned typewriter. And when she got the typewriter, she felt like, when she touched it, she felt like she was a literary genius. Yeah, for those below 170, a typewriter is this thing when you used to press the buttons like that and it would make little letters on paper. All right. 30 years later, she writes for both young adults and adults in the genres of multicultural urban fantasy, futurism, paranormal, romance, and horror. She works as a media specialist, and that's also known as a school librarian, in a metro Atlanta school system. Her first book, Breaking Free, will be available February 2012. Let's give Alicia McCalla a hand. Next up, we have Miss Nicole Kurtz. She's an author, publisher, and teacher. She's driven 6 hours to be here, so we're thankful for that. Hopefully she'll be able to stay awake on the panel and help us out. That's a long drive. Her works in sci-fi, fantasy, and horror have been finalists for the Dream Realm Award and for the Epi Award. She is CEO of Mocha Memoirs Press, a publishing company that seeks to publish stories that invigorate and invoke strong, lingering emotions, like good coffee and a good memoir. Right? So let's give Miss Nicole Kurtz a hand. Happy to have her. And finally, last but not least, we have the acclaimed author of 3 novels in the genre of sword and soul, the books Meiji Book 1, Meiji Book 2, and Changa Safari. And he's actually brought out a 4th book, editing it with Charles Saunders, who's the father of Sword and Soul, who we'll talk about a little later. And he's contributing author of the book also. It's called Griots, a Sword and Soul Anthology. And he is the editor-in-chief of MV Media LLC, a micro-publisher specializing in sci-fi and fantasy. Let's give Milton Davis a hand. And I am your panelist, Balogun. I'm a writer. A couple of these people are very special to me because they're my publishers. And I have some novels out soon. I have nonfiction works out. And I'm a huge fan, always have been, of speculative fiction. And when I found the Black Speculative Fiction, the Black Science Fiction Society, I found out there were other authors who looked like me who were writing and reading the stuff. Because when I was in school, there was a group of only like 5 or 6 of us in high school who were into speculative fiction. You know, and if it wasn't for the fact that I was a martial artist and a football player, I probably would have been picked on because of it. So, I was happy to find other people like me. So, we're going to go ahead into the questions. What we're going to do is ask questions of our panelists. They're going to share some of their work, and then you all can field questions of our writers and our publishers. All right, the first question: what is black speculative fiction?
That's an interesting question, because to me, being black is who we are, but we're spirit first in these bodies having this experience, so we happen to be black. And I feel like it's, the whole science fiction thing is being able to tap some aspect of self and allow it to come out and be put on paper, and it's a message that comes from within that you choose to share with those who are ready to receive. All of us have our messages, and some of our messages will be similar, some of them will be different, but a lot of them, they're all parallel in the sense of the area of which that we choose to express ourselves in.
And you all can feel free to express yourselves and give a hand to our panelists.
Yeah, you guys might want to really give me a hand with that one. Speculative fiction, I think speculative fiction in and of itself ranges from all the way up from just something that's a little different, all the way up to something that's legitimately science fiction, could be fantasy, urban fantasy. And I think the black part, or the African part, comes in when you deal with issues that directly affect African Americans or people in the African diaspora. So when you mix all those things together, then you get what we call the black speculative fiction. So it could be a horror story, but it's something specific to that the culture.
Yeah, immensely. To piggyback on what Alicia said, for me, I think black speculative fiction is characters and situations that I can identify with as an African American. I remember when I saw Star Wars as a kid, and I was really freaked out. There was no one in it that looked like me. Well, they had to add him for the second movie. So I was really disappointed that no one else looked like me. And then I had to search for it, and I had to hunt for it. And surely I couldn't be the only one, because my father and I spent a lot of time watching science fiction and speculative movies. So I couldn't be the only person of color who enjoyed this. But nothing that I was reading or finding reflected that. My experience is things that I can identify with. So as a publisher, that's what I seek to do, publish stories where those characters are people that I can identify with. And those situations might be as different as something speculative, all the way up to science fiction. Agreed with what Alicia said. But for me, African American speculative fiction is that. It's characters, situations that not only connect to us as human beings, but reflect African Americans or Africans' experiences in the future, in a futuristic setting or in a speculative setting.
What they said. Basically, I think the ladies covered it well. From my standpoint, I think our experiences are similar, that we all were into science fiction and fantasy and didn't see ourselves represented. Me personally, I came at it basically from the fantasy section, from reading old Conan books, and I would read Conan, and I was like, okay, Conan is great, but every time I see black people, they're wild and savage unless they got a white person leading them, and then they can get something done. And I was like, this is not the history that I know. So that kind of led me to Sword and Soul. But as far as black speculative fiction, I think it goes as simple as just having black main characters in what you could call conventional science fiction settings, like seeing Star Wars. But then, and it goes as deep as having situations where the story would not exist unless it came from an African American or African perspective. So it kind of runs the range. The term speculative fiction is a new term, and to me, because it was developed to cover everything that was I guess, other than mainstream fiction, horror, paranormal, science fiction, fantasy, and everything like that. And what I think what all of us do is basically try to represent ourselves on every level of what speculative fiction would be, from just having a character who happens to be black or having a character that has to be black. So that's basically what it is to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Now, why black speculative fiction? Wouldn't you reach a broader readership if you had a Caucasian protagonist? Would you sell more books, Milton, if your novels were set in the Shire of Thistledorn instead of the grasslands of Uhuru? So why black speculative fiction? Okay.
I have several friends who are authors, and they are African American, but they do not write characters of color. They have opted to start off with white characters because they believe that that is definitely more marketable. For me, though, I disagree. Now, I'm a school librarian, and so I work in a school that's multicultural. So in my stories, I have a wide range of characters, but my protagonists tend to be African American protagonists. And I believe that for me, as working in high school and I've worked in colleges, there is a dire need for our children to see characters of color that look like them. I don't know if some of the parents out there have seen Percy Jackson or they read Rick Riordan's books. I've had several young men say, "Oh, Miss McCalla, I really, really want to find something like this, but that has the character for me." So there's something out there for authors that we need to serve that population. If we don't, we're doing a disservice.
This is interesting. When I started my book, it wasn't a consideration. I mean, I'm black. My character is going to be black. I mean, but it's my books. My book is a mystical slice of life. My characters, like for example, my main character's name is Martin, but his great-grandfather's name is Gustav. It apparently channeled through me because that's not a black name. But, and I have I think some of my characters, they might be Mediterranean or something, but the main character, he's black. But I didn't come up with it. It came through me and I kind of penned it. But